There isn't a single country on Earth without farmers or farming. In some way or another, every single one of us is connected to agriculture. But have you ever wondered how farming actually began? How did primitive humans, thousands of years ago, discover this method that would change everything? Today, we're going to uncover that exact story. Our story begins nearly 12,000 years ago, in a world where farming didn't exist at all. There were no fields, no crops, no farmers, just wild, untouched land stretching endlessly under the open sky. Back then, humans lived as nomads, hunters and gatherers who never stayed in one place for too long. Their entire existence depended on constantly moving to find food. They didn't build permanent homes. Instead, small groups of people wandered from forest to forest, from valley to valley, chasing herds of animals and searching for wild plants. Life revolved around two things: hunting wild animals for meat and gathering fruits, roots, and berries wherever they could be found. Every single day was a struggle for survival. This lifestyle continued for thousands and thousands of years. No villages, no houses, no fixed address, just temporary shelters built from branches and leaves, abandoned within days. But then, something massive began to happen to the planet itself. The last ice age was slowly coming to an end, and Earth's climate started shifting in ways that would change human history forever. As the ice melted away, the weather grew warmer and wetter. Barren, frozen lands slowly transformed into lush, green grasslands stretching across huge parts of the world. In one particular region, this climate shift caused something extraordinary. Wild wheat and wild barley began growing in huge, dense patches, completely on their own. This region came to be known as the Fertile Crescent, an area covering parts of modern-day Iraq, Syria, and Jordan. It would soon become the birthplace of farming itself. When wandering groups of humans passed through this land, they were stunned. Never before had they seen so much wild grain growing together in one single place. At first, they simply did what they always did. They harvested the wild grain by hand, gathering as much as they could carry, and ate it right away. But this field was so rich with food that instead of moving on to the next region, they kept coming back to the exact same spot, again and again. And it was during one of these return trips that someone noticed something strange. A few grains that had fallen on the ground were sprouting into tiny new plants. It was a small, almost accidental observation. But that single moment of curiosity would go on to completely reshape the future of human civilization. Slowly, people began to understand a simple but powerful idea. If a fallen seed could grow into a new plant, then maybe they could plant seeds on purpose, wherever they wanted. So they started experimenting. They took handfuls of seeds and deliberately scattered them across patches of soil, hoping new plants would grow. And it worked. This was, quite literally, the very first act of intentional farming in human history, a moment that changed everything that came after it. In the beginning, their tools were incredibly simple. They used sharpened wooden sticks to poke small holes into the ground before dropping seeds inside. Over time, they learned to read the seasons, watching the rain clouds, the sun, and the soil to figure out exactly when it was the right time to plant. Wheat and barley became their first true crops, the two plants that would go on to feed entire civilizations for thousands of years to come. Farmers began paying close attention to their harvest. Every year, they carefully picked out the biggest, healthiest-looking grains from their crop. Instead of eating those best grains, they saved them for the next planting season, using only the strongest seeds to grow the next generation of crops. Generation after generation, this simple habit was repeated thousands of times, and slowly, the crops themselves began to change, growing bigger, stronger, and more productive. Today, we call this process selective breeding, but back then, it was simply humans quietly reshaping nature, one harvest at a time. As farming grew, so did the need for better tools. Humans began crafting sharp, stone-bladed sickles, specifically designed to cut down stalks of grain quickly. To prepare the soil for planting, they invented simple wooden plows, dragging them through the earth to loosen it before scattering their seeds. They also needed a way to store their harvest safely, so they learned to shape clay into sturdy pots and dig storage pits to protect their grain. Digging sticks, stone sickles, wooden plows, clay pots, these humble tools together formed humanity's very first farming technology. But now a new problem appeared. You simply couldn't plant a field, walk away for months as a wandering hunter, and expect to come back to a healthy harvest. Farming demanded something humans had never truly done before, staying in one place. And so, for the very first time, people began settling permanently near their fields. They started building the very first permanent homes. Simple huts made from mud, straw, and dried branches, meant to last far longer than any temporary shelter before. One family's hut soon had a neighbor, then another, and another. Slowly, small clusters of homes began forming near the most fertile farmland. And just like that, without anyone realizing it at the time, the very first villages in human history were born. With a settled life came something incredibly precious, a steady, reliable food supply. No more days of uncertainty about where the next meal would come from. With more consistent food, more children survived into adulthood than ever before. And for the first time, human populations began to grow rapidly. Farms began producing more food than any single family could possibly eat, creating something entirely new in human history, a surplus. To make use of this extra food, people built the world's first granaries, raised storage huts, designed specifically to keep large amounts of grain safe and dry. For the first time in human history, not everyone had to spend every waking hour searching for food. This freed people up to do other things. Some people began specializing in entirely new crafts, shaping clay into pottery, weaving fibers into cloth, or carving wood and stone into tools. Around the same time, humans made another groundbreaking discovery. Wild animals, too, could be tamed and kept close, instead of hunted from afar. Goats and sheep were among the very first animals domesticated by humans, and cattle soon followed, becoming permanent companions of farming communities. These animals provided milk, meat, wool, and leather resources so valuable that entire communities began organizing their lives around caring for them. With crops in the fields and animals in the pens, humans had created something entirely new, an agricultural way of life that would define civilization for millennia. Villages that had once housed a handful of families slowly grew larger and larger, eventually transforming into the very first towns. In regions like Mesopotamia, along the banks of great rivers, these growing towns eventually gave rise to the world's very first civilizations. As surplus grain piled up, people needed ways to trade it for other goods, and so the very first systems of trade and commerce began to emerge. To keep track of harvests, trades, and debts, humans eventually needed a way to record information, and this necessity gave birth to the world's first written language. And so, from one small, curious observation about a sprouting seed, an entire chain of events unfolded, one that eventually gave rise to villages, towns, trade, writing, and civilization itself. So there you have it, the incredible story of how farming truly began. If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because there are so many more untold stories from the ancient world still waiting to be discovered.